Hello everyone. I'm back with my notes on House of Leaves. We have officially finished with the main narrative, and now are working on, this video will be on the exhibits, future videos will be on the appendices, so let's just dive into it. I'm not going through, like, theories. These are just, like, my research notes, for you to develop your own theories. And for me to develop my theories. So just research. There will be spoilers, but if you're at this point, you've probably finished the whole text, right? Start with the exhibits. We'll start with page 531 here. These books are real books. The little book of hand shadows. Oh, okay. Why are you blocking an eBay page? That's interesting. Anywho, so this is what the book would look like. Let's make this bigger. There we go. There's the little book of hand shadows by Phila H. Webb and Jane Corby. I guess the Y is missing there. I think eBay is one of the best places actually to look for these kind of things. And yeah. 1927. There's lots of interesting things that you can try and do in there. And then we have this Sati Akath and Bella Chandran's Fun with Hand Shadows. And apparently my version is in Spanish for some reason, but it is a real book as well. Okay. Page 532. I decided to look into all of the origin of the words of these chemicals. So potassium comes from potash, meaning water-soluble part of wood ash. Ash trees are very significant in House of Leaves. Used, not sued, used for making soap, glass, and fertilizer. Argon comes from the Greek argos, meaning lazy. Rubidium is named after the Latin word rubidius, meaning deep red. So we have, red there, Minotaur being red. It's a significant color. Strontium is just named after this village in Scotland. Samarium is actually one of the first chemicals named after a person, named after Vasily Yegorofovich Samarsky-Bikovitz. He was a Russian mining engineer. I couldn't find anything else significant about him. Neodymium is from the Greek didymus, meaning twin. So we have maybe a reference to brothers there, possibly. Uranium-235 was used in the bomb Little Boy on Hiroshima in 1945. It's also used to help determine the age of the Milky Way. Uranium-238 is the most common form of uranium, and it's non-fissile, which means it won't go boom. Yeah. And then I put down the atomic numbers. I don't know if they mean anything, but you never know. There could be some sort of weird code there. I wonder... No, they don't correlate to number, like the alphabet, because there's 38 and all that kind of stuff. Anywho, zero folder is interesting, because it's a computer folder that appears empty, but isn't actually empty. So it shows 0 bytes for folder that should actually contain data. So maybe they just didn't have the right password or anything. Nothing's I had to say about 534, page 533, but on page 534, we have a reference to this Air Force manual, and it is a real manual. I have it here. I think I have the right page. There we go. So there's what it looks like, the Air Force Manual Search and Rescue Guide from 15th of August, 1969. Here. And if we look at page 23, Oh, this says it's pages 2 to 33, but page 23 has what we are looking for. 22, 23, which is this code symbol thingy, which should look familiar. On page 582, we have it replicated right here. Zam says page 233, 2-33. If you look down at the numbers over here, it says like 2-11. So I went to 2-33 to see what that was about. 17. Oh, let's keep scrolling. 5, 6, 7, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. This one's 33. 2-33. It's about where to find water in deserts. Yeah. Page 535. The Sheehan Clinician Rated Anxiety Scale is a real scale. This is a PDF copy of it. You can fill it out if you're feeling anxious. This was given to Karen. We obviously don't have the completed version of hers, but we have this bit here. Then we have the Marks and Matthews Phobia Scale, which is also real. So it's a questionnaire that you fill out. Yeah. And if you see on page 582, we have clippings of these things. So we have the Sheehan thing over here, and then where the phobia thing is. But there's information there about it. Yeah. These are all real as well, but I didn't feel like pitting them up. Yeah. And I'm also in this video, because otherwise it'd be really short, go into the Appendix 1 here as well. So outlines and chapter titles. I didn't think there was anything in there, so I wanted to go to bits here. Because it sounds like exhibits and bits. Let's do them in the same video. Why not? Okay, page 542 we are on now. Captain Kittinger is a person. He was the first man to solo across the Atlantic Ocean in a gas balloon. The first man to see the curvature of the Earth from being up there. And he was also a pilot and a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War is very prevalent to House of Lees. Navidson and Zampano both fought in Vietnam. We have a reference here, October 31st, 1968. October 31st, 1968. The finest cenotaph, which could possibly refer to the Black Power salute at the 1968 Olympics, occurred just a few days before this. That's what I thought that could possibly be. We have this reference down here. I can't pronounce French, but Terraire Comme de la Pens. That's how we'll say it. It's French slang meaning to F like rabbits. Or it could be Se faire tirer comme de la Pens. Pardon my French. To be shot like rabbits. That is also referenced in the introduction on page 22. 22 here. And I didn't highlight it, of course. Is that the right page? Yeah. Oh well. It's there. Just can't find it. Oh, that was the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, I have it all all together. Don't mind me. 543, we have September 21st, 1970. He says, I could create a son. Interestingly enough, this is 9 months before Johnny's birthday. So, did Zampano create Johnny? Who knows? December 15th, 1974. As I've often lingered on Hudson in his shallop, and then Casado and Molino. These are references to a story told on page 136 to 137. We have the word shallop down here, and the Hudson Mutiny full story takes place there. And then Song of Quesada and Molino. We'll talk about that later, but this is the page that he's referencing here. Okay. And then we have April 19th, 1975. It's 105 degrees and rising. Mother wants you to call home. Stop. This is when Johnny was 4 years old, and this is when he was burned by the oil. Yeah. So, Mother, something hot. Stop. Yeah. So Johnny's being burned by the oil. There's that connection between Zampano and Pelifina and Johnny there. Okay. Page 544. We're still in the little bits that, what's his name wrote? Zampano. We have this reference to Lothario, which is Italian slang for an unscrupulous seducer of women. It's also a character from A Story Within a Story in Don Quixote. Don Quixote is referenced multiple times in House of Leaves, especially even in reference to Quesada and Molino that we just had on this page. Yeah. So Lothario is a character from Don Quixote, from The Story Within a Story called The Ill-Advised Curiosity, where a man decides to test the fidelity of his wife and everyone ends up dying. Yeah. So we have that. Again, there's a lot of references to Karen's affairs throughout House of Leaves, so that unfaithful wife. March 18th, 1989, MA is in the bush. MA is military action. Or maze in the bush. Just like a labyrinth. Then on the next page, we have this person, Günther Nietzsche. That's how I'm going to say his name, because I don't speak German. And he was a specialist in East Asian architecture. And then we have Norberg Schultz, who is also an architect, modernist movement architect. He talked about architectural phenomena. I can't say that word. There's too many N sounds. Phenomenology. Try and say that 10 times fast. Which is the philosophical study of the structures of experience and consciousness. He rejects the concept of objective research. Analyzing human behavior will give a greater understanding of nature. He's also referenced on page 113 and 441. So he's referenced multiple times. We have this book, Glass. It's written by Jacques Derrida. Derrida is often quoted in House of Leaves. He is actually quoted on page 112. Derrida's quote right there. Its form and content invite a reflection on the nature of literary genre and writing. That was an interesting question. And his reference here to Mr. Levi Jr. and Mr. Rand are the people who translated Glass into English. April 22nd, we get a reference to an atrocity sinking to the waters of darkness. And atrocity comes from the word atrox, which means terrible and cruel, and atar, which means matte black. But we also have the story on page 298. 298. From here on, the story of a ship sinking that Johnny tells, called The Atrocity. I have this reference here: stars to live by, stars to steer by, stars to die by. There's lots of references to stars in House of Leaves. For example, on page uh, 23 of the introduction. Yeah. 23. We have this reference to find a sky so full of stars it will blind you again. I'm blinded by stars. Who do you know that's blind? Zampano is blind. And then on page 509. 509, we get another Johnny reference to stars. Try taking in the billions of stars above, lingering long enough to allow each point of light the chance to scratch a deep hole in the back of my retina. So more stars blinding you. And then again on page 605, we have Polyphena signing off her letter. As your mother loves you like the old seafarers loved the stars. And then we have this Hindi phrase here, Kuch Dekka, Kuch Nahim Sahib. Pardon my accent. It's Hindi for what are you watching? Nothing, sir, is the response. So what are you watching? Nothing, sir. It's common in Indian gangster movies, actually, to ensure that witnesses to a crime will say that they saw nothing. So that's interesting. I thought, what did he witness that happened in May? May 30th, we get a reference to Fellini, or it could be Fellini. Fellini is Fellini. Sorry, is a or Fellini. It could be pronounced that way. I don't speak Italian. He's a filmmaker, and he had a film called La Strada, which features a character named Zampano. That's right. So Fellini said that this movie was actually a complete catalog of my entire mythological world, a dangerous representation of my identity that was undertaken with no precedent whatsoever. So I thought that was interesting in reference to House of Leaves, maybe. Okay. 546, November 11th, we have this phrase, defend a strays, hun. Which could be defenestration. So starting on page 119, we get this window that you can fall through, maybe. Or it could be a reference to Daisy going through the window as well. Or a stray's hun, a stray's son, perhaps, Johnny Truant. So he's a stray, he's a strayer, he's a runaway, he's a stray son of Zampano's. Never know. Page 547. I've been waiting to talk about the bald gnome error forever. I was so excited when I found what the bald gnome error was, because it was driving me crazy when I first came across it. And now I get to finally talk about it. Okay, it's referenced multiple times throughout House of Leaves, but here we're going to talk about it. Bald gnome error. It's from The Anxiety of Influence, a Theory of Poetry by Harold Bloom. He's like a very well-known literary critic. And this is a quote from it. Critics in their secret hearts love continuity, but he who lives with continuity alone cannot be a poet. The god of poets is not Apollo, who lives in rhythm of recurrence, but the bald gnome error, who lives at the back of a cave and skulks forth only at irregular intervals to feast upon the mighty dead in the dark of the moon. Hermes ages into a bald gnome, calls himself Error, and founds commerce. So Hermes had feathers on his ankles, but the bald gnome has featherless ankles. Featherless ankles. On page 138, here we have Pelican Poems, a perfect example of why errors should be hastily excised. I'm not going to talk about my theory about the bald gnome error in regards to House of Leaves, but I'm so excited to do it when it finally comes up. We're going to talk more about the anxiety of influence, though, because I think this is important, too. So, for Harold Bloom, this was his whole idea, is that poets are influenced by previous poets, and they have to go through steps to overcome previous poets. And it's interesting, my idea is that Johnny maybe goes through these steps in relation to Zampano. So what are these 6 steps? Number 1, clinamen, which is poetic misreading, swerving away from the precursor, from word meaning, swerving atoms that make change possible. 2. Second step, tessera, is completion and antithesis, completing a precursor's work. From word meaning, this word means fragment constituting a whole. Kenosis is a defense mechanism employed against compulsive repetition, discontinuity from your precursor. It's from a word used to refer to Jesus accepting his reduction from divine to human. Then we have demonization, which is to derive something beyond your precursor's attempt, from a word meaning aid, from an intermediary who is neither divine nor human. Ascesis is the movement of self-purgation, to separate from others and to stress your individuality, from the word asceticism, which is absence from worldly pleasures. And then lastly, apophrades, return of the dead. The poet opens up to the precursor's influence. It's from a word meaning days on which the dead return to re-inhabit the house in which they once lived. I thought that was quite interesting to see, to maybe go through and see if Johnny goes through those steps. But as I said, this is not theories. These are just notes to help eventually. April 9th, 1966, we get this interesting word, paralipomena, which means when a copyist makes a deliberate or inadvertent alterations to the text that is being reproduced. It could also mean supplementary literary material, like the appendix that we are reading. October 2nd, we get a reference to the 7 lamps of architecture. As you can see, I wrote them down here. I don't know what these all have to do with architecture, but this is what the 7 lamps are. The first is sacrifice, so dedication of man's craft to God as visible proof of love and obedience. The second is truth, honest display of materials and structure. The third lamp is power, reach forwards, sublimity. I'm having trouble with words today, I'm sorry. The third is power, reach forwards, sublimity. That's how I'm going to say it. I can't even speak English sometimes. You guys expect me to speak French and German and Latin and all this other stuff. Anywho, sublimity of nature by the action of human mind upon them. Fourth is beauty, which is aspiration towards God. Fifth is life, should be made by human hands, joy of masons associated with expressive freedom that's been given to them. 6 is memory building, should respect the culture from which they develop. And 7 is obedience, no originality for its own sake, conform to values. The cats have been dying, we are told. That happens on page 77. Page 77. There are only cats, but cats to Kilkenny disappear. Cats are disappearing. Cats are dying. We get a reference to Redwood. I've talked about Redwood before. Redwood was the name of a short story that Mark C. Danilewski wrote for his dad. His father didn't like it, and it discouraged. His father discouraged him from writing. There's a lot more to it, but I've explained it, as I said before. I gotta keep going. Yeah, let's keep going. We'll go up until the next appendix. Appendix C. That's what this is. Bits and pieces. So this page in the top left-hand corner up here, it's almost intelligible. It may be some of the same information relayed via the Reston interview that we see on page 342. The Reston interview. And in the bottom right hand here we have, it says, the last thing anyone hears from Holloway are 3 short blasts followed by 3 long blasts on the radio. dot 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 dash 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 or SO question mark. So this could be an alternative ending to chapter 8. Okay. Then we have this text here. This is additional information regarding the ambulance that we found on page 523. The ambulance information. And we have this list at the bottom here. Says checkmark Actaeon arrow mislock. Actaeon is a character from Greek mythology who surprised Artemis in her bath, and he got turned into a stag. And in some versions, he's then devoured by dogs. And we have a reference to a painting by Paul de Vos on page 350. Paulus de Vos, where it's dogs attacking a stag. And mislock could be a mislook or a sinful look, because that's Actaeon saw Artemis in her bath. He did a sinful look. Then we have a check mark, love you most by, on page 594. We have this from Polyphena here, who will always love you most. Mommy. The other thing on this is mutato nomine diti fabula narrator, which is, this translated to English, just change the name and the story is about you, from Horace. It means that one day this could also happen to you. It's the meaning of that phrase. I'm pointing here like you can actually see and I can actually see, but I think this one here says temporis edax rerum. Temporis should probably be tempus. It's from Ovid's Metamorphosis that says time destroys all. And then the last one says, I am not always around, but I'm never far away. And then over here, we have this little writing bit that says peridesa, which means wall surrounded. It's from the old Iranian, piari, which means around, and deisa, which means wall. It's our origin for the word paradise. And this page further goes on to describe the 8-foot fence that surrounds Ash Tree Lane. And if we look at page 503 as well, Johnny goes to visit the Whalestow, and there's an 8-foot high fence around Whalestow. So, Whalestow, Ash Tree Lane house, are they the same thing? Here on page 551, this largest note right here is the handwritten part of we find on page 465 over here, the reference to the book that he has with him. The envelope, this part right here, is the part that's written in Braille from chapter 20. Let me just find out what page that is. Chapter 20 is page 423. So this Braille bit here, this is the translation on the envelope. The typed note right here is from chapter 18. It's similar to the Tiggs/Verm diary chapter. And this burned note is from page 335. So these are like examples of the bits and notes that Johnny probably would have found. In Zampano's collections. And here's more examples of that. So this top note is talking about infanticide and killing children. We actually have a close-up of the note here. So I'll link this down below. But it says, perhaps I will alter the whole thing, kill both children. Murder is a better word. Chad scrambles to escape, almost making it to the front door where Karen waits until a corner in the foyer suddenly leaps forward and something the boy in half, saws the boy in half maybe. At the same time, Navidson by the kitchen reaches for Daisy, only to arrive a fraction of a second too late. His finger finding air, his eyes scratching after Daisy as she falls to her death. Let both parents experience that. Let their narcissism find a new object to wither by. Douse them in infanticide. Drown them in blood. So that brings into question whether Zampano made up the Navidson record or not. I looked up this phone number too, and it is actually the phone number for the Conant. So, if you want to call them, phone number's here. Yeah, so did he originally plan to kill them in the narrative, meaning that the Navidson record is indeed fake? This red section here is Johnny trying to define the word ghost, because Johnny writes in red, is what I'm assuming, because if Johnny's the Minotaur, red is associated with him. So the noun is derived from Middle English gost, G-O-S-T, from the Old English gast, G-A-S-T, or G-A-E-S-T, which means breath or spirit. You can kind of make out the words here. Soul ghost compared to the modern English Holy Ghost, from the Proto-West Germanic Geist, from Proto-Germanic, this is the origins of the word, this is what this is saying. And then I have, I use Wiktionary. I think it's really cool. It gives you a whole history of the words. Here. And if we go to page 500, we see some other ghostly kids. It doesn't reference the kids specifically here, I think, but we get a reference to this place called the Peyton Randolph Hotel, and in there, 2 kids have died. A boy fell out of a tree, so trees are very significant in House of Leaves, and a girl who fell out of a window. And Daisy they were trying to push Daisy out of the window. So, yeah, that's interesting. And then we have, this is found on page 531. This is found on page 534. This is found on page 530. Got a reference to Fellini here. And down here at the bottom, we have to wound, tear, pit to Pisces. And that same error, instead of pieces, is found on page 41. We'll go to that one first. So, mistake that Johnny makes. Zampano makes, tears her to Pisces. And then that same mistake is made by Polyphena, tore me to Pisces. And the bottom note here is page 28. So these are, and then I moved over to this one. So this is list of books to be used in the exhibits. It's a section that's missing. So we have a reference to Fellini here, and that is Essays and Criticism by Federico Fellini, which is a real book. I'll open up here. Archive.org is great. I highly recommend it. I'm going to borrow it quickly here. And, you can see pages 39 and 54, which are referenced in this. Oh, no, that's not the right picture. Sorry. But are referenced in this little section over here are about the film La Strada. There. And this handwritten note in the corner up here, this section, says, from what we can determine, writing more, sketching that place to see its darkness, as if to see, can't read it, himself, illegible, the flames of my blank past. Some words that can't be made out. This letter to the editor here. Colster, possibly Newt Colster, because he's also referenced on page 82. In the footnotes down here, Newt Colster. He's not a real person, though. And then we get the Ithaca Model 37 trench guns. I already talked about that because the gun is referenced on page 31. It being in the battered shotgun bearing the initials RLB. And I already talked about the gun on that page. Okay. I didn't write this in my notes, but here we go on to the Song of Caseta and Molino, because I already talked about this on page 137. This is what this is referencing. The Song of Caseta and Molino. So Caseta means cheesecake, but it's also a name that Don Quixote goes by. And the musical, because if it's a song, there's a musical made about Don Quixote called Man from La Mancha, and I thought possibly To Dream the Impossible Dream is probably what it's referring to. And this is the part of the lyrics that stood out to me as most relevant to House of Leaves. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to be willing to march into hell that one man scorned and covered in scars. Johnny, his forearms at least are covered in scars. So it's missing, but I think that might be the Song of Caseta and Molino. And this is the last section. We're going to go through these poems. Sorry, this video is getting a bit long. That place, could that be hell? Moo of a Dragon. So I looked up that, and it actually, the Mo, I guess, and the fabled Moo, is a Hawaiian dragon. And when Mo, I don't speak Hawaiian, so that's how I'm going to say it. When a Mo dies, its body becomes part of the landscape. That was interesting. We get this reference here to Summer Love and Root Beer, and that's a reference back to Polyphena again, or forward to Polyphena. You're reading it page by page as opposed to jumping all over like some people do. She says, "May your summer be full of root beer, joy, and play." That was interesting. Connection there. Where someone once saw two eyes. I thought that was interesting. I looked up eyes. Now here I have 71, but there I said 77. So let's see which page it actually is. Page 71. It is page 71. I've seen the eyes. The eyes, they have no whites. I thought that could possibly be a reference. Who knows? Yeah. Onto this one, The Panther. I thought it could be reminiscent of another poem that's been referenced, called The Other Tiger by Borges on page 313 here. That's what this poem is quoted from. There's a lot of different references throughout it to there. Like Borges' poem talks about metaphor versus reality and stuff like that. And I always come up with interesting words. Chiaroscuro, which is a photographic technique in which one side of a face or something is well lit and the other side is in shadow. So it's kind of like duality. Is there? Okay. Didn't have anything to say about 560, aside from me just trying to analyze the poem, but that's not research notes. Those are just random thoughts. Yes, I'm talking about like things that I have evidence for in these videos, not just my random thoughts in the book. Natasha. Who's Natasha? Well, on page 116 we get another reference to a Natasha. Here you go. Zampano wrote about Natasha. Zampano's Natasha also lives in Tolstoy's Guerrillas pages. Natasha from Tolstoy is often, she's from War and Peace and is often called Tolstoy's ideal woman. Yeah. Down here we have this reference to the angles of your wrists. And I thought maybe that could be a reference to Polyphena. She's rompido mi muñeca, which is a Spanish. It means I broke my wrist, but it's a reference to a suicide attempt. Okay. Page 562. You get a reference to a black fence. Could that be the well so the house? It could also reference to the house. And then we have this reference to Wyeth Red. And Wyeth was a painter, and he painted this interesting picture that has a lot of red in it, called The Red House. I thought that was interesting to look at. Troy is nothing more. We get this phrase twice in House of Leaves. Fuit Ilium, which means Troy is no more. So it's another reference to things that have been said before by Phila on page 597. Fuit Ilium. And then 466. I can't remember who said that one. 466. So if these are hypothetically written by Zampano, then these phrases were also used by Pelafina and by it is Zampano again. This is like the most famous poem from the book. I didn't really have much to say about it. 564. We have a lot to say about this. So we have this phrase up here, which is part of a poem, and it translates as, there's two different translations, but they basically mean the same thing. My hard formal dreams will know just how to ride you. My destiny in a gold chariot will be your handsome driver, who will take for reins drawn in tight frenzy my verses peregrines of all poetry. And this is the full translation of this. Yeah, let's read it. It was autumn. It was autumn and it was the season of war. Do you remember the war? Me, less and less. But I remember the fall. I still see the fogs of the meadows next to the house, and beyond the silent oaks in the twilight. The leaves have fallen since September. They browned and evoked then the spirit of my youth and also the spirit of the time. Often I went to the woods, I crossed the meadows, and for a long time I hunted below the branches in the shadows among the leaves. Once before entering the woods, I remember that there was a black horse staring at me from afar. He was at the bottom of the field. I imagined he was looking at me, while probably he was asleep. Why do I think of this horse now? I do not know. Perhaps for the same reason I think of all these words I wrote at the same time. I kept the leaf, or sheet, because le fuel can mean either, where I had noted everything that had come to my mind. At the time I thought they belonged to me, but now I know I was wrong. Every time I reread them, I see that I was copying only what someone had told me. I'm going to write there about the anxiety of influence, right there. Do not be afraid, I will not stop. I must discover this clearing, and I will not stop until I find it. Do you know what drives me to look for it? Well, nobody. My wife is dead. My wife, my daughter, and my son are all dead. Do you remember how they died? Me, less and less. I only remember the time. My injuries are not very deadly, but I'm afraid I will not find this clearing. I stayed for a while watching the shadows, the leaves, and the branches. Then, when I left the wood, I saw nothing but the fog around me. I could see neither the house nor the meadows, only the fog, and of course the black horse had disappeared. So that's interesting. Le fuel, le foulet, I don't know how to speak French, is also a poem by Anton Arnault. And it's this. Of your detached stem, poor withered leaf, where are you going? I do not know. The storm broke the oak, who alone was my support. Of his inconstant breath, the zephyr or the Aquilian, since that day, I walk from the forest to the plain, from mountain to valley. I go where the wind takes me without complaining or scaring me. I go where everything goes. Where does the rose leaf go and the bay leaf? So, Le Cheval Noir, the black horse, could possibly be a reference to Revelations, and the four horsemen. One comes in on a black horse, and that's often agreed to be famine. So from Revelations chapter 6, verses 5 to 6, when he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, Come, I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. It could also be a reference to Bucephalus, or Bucephalus, which is Alexander the Great's horse, because Bucephalus means ox-headed, from Brander scar on the horse that looked like an ox's head. Ox, bull, you know, what else has a bull's head? Who knows? So that's it for that appendix. I'm going to do separately appendix 2. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Oh, I forgot also to say, sorry. In the French version of the text, this page is actually in Vietnamese, which is a nod to Zampano and Nevinson having fought in the Vietnam War. So it's interesting that different languages will have different translation versions. So yeah, that's it. Let me know your thoughts on this section of House of Leaves, and thank you so much for watching.